I was reborn together with Wen Qinian. In my previous life, he loved the princess, but he married me by imperial decree. After marriage, he treated me with respect, yet there was always a sense of distance between us. Not long after, the princess went to the northern desert to marry for political alliance. That night, Wen Qinian drank himself into a stupor, calling out his elder sister's childhood name all night long. 3 years later, a palace coup broke out in the northern desert, and his elder sister was about to be forced into a second marriage with the new king of the northern desert. When Qinian volunteered to lead troops to attack the northern desert and bring his elder sister back. By then, I was already 2 months pregnant. No matter how desperately I pleaded, Wen Qinian still mounted his horse without looking back. On the day he welcomed the princess back, I died in childbirth, along with my unborn child, given a second chance at life. When Qinian intercepted me on my way to seek the imperial marriage decree, he spoke with heartfelt sincerity. I already have someone in my heart. Even if you marry me, princess, you will never be happy. Looking at his eagerness to distance himself, I suddenly laughed. He has already failed me once in this lifetime. What makes him think I would still marry him? When I was 10 years old, when Qinian was brought into the palace to become the study companion of the crown prince, my elder brother. He is 2 years older than me. Since both his parents died in battle, he inherited the title early and became the youngest marquis in the Great Qi. I heard from my father that Wen Qinian's parents were both formidable generals, so I often pestered Wen Qinian to teach me martial arts. Occasionally, when Wen Qinian grew tired of my pestering, he would teach me a few moves. After I came of age, my mother intended to marry me off to my cousin from my maternal grandfather's family, but I was unwilling. So I went to ask my father to arrange a marriage for me with Wen Qinian. My father, who had always doted on me, immediately issued an imperial decree. Before my wedding with Wen Qinian, the king of Morbei sent a letter, requesting to marry a princess of Darqi as his queen. There are 3 princesses in the royal family, the second elder sister, myself, and the 5th younger sister who has not yet come of age. I am already engaged. And the final candidate for the marriage alliance has been decided to be the second elder sister. On the wedding night, when Wen Qinian entered the bridal chamber, he reeked of alcohol, staggering so much that he could hardly stand. At that time, I thought he had drunk a few extra cups because he was happy. Soon, the envoys from the northern desert arrived in the capital to welcome the bride. On the day my elder sister left the capital, Wen Qinian shut himself in his study for an entire day. When I pushed open the study door, I found him lying on the floor, clutching a jade pendant in his arms, completely drunk and unconscious, yet he was still murmuring my elder sister's maiden name softly under his breath. That was the second time I saw him drunk. Both times he lost his composure were because of my elder sister. After my elder sister married into the royal family, when Qinian became even colder toward me, I knew that although he was by my side, his heart had long since followed my elder sister. I also learned that the jade pendant he always kept with him was a gift from the royal sister. Once, while Wen Qinian was asleep, I tried to take a closer look at that jade pendant, but he suddenly woke up and snatched it away from me. That was the first time Wen Qinian ever lost his temper with me. Taking without asking is theft. Is this how the Grand Tutor taught Princess Linen? I was raised in luxury and have never heard such words before. No matter how much I liked him, I couldn't bear it. Immediately, my temper flared, and I had a big argument with him. Afterwards, when Qinian sulked and refused to speak to me, for the first time, I didn't lower my head to coax him. Instead, I accepted the 2 male consorts sent by the crown prince, my elder brother. I deliberately summoned the consorts into my room at the hour when Wen Qinian usually retired for the night. Yet deep down, I secretly anticipated his reaction. When Wen Qinian saw it, he said nothing, just expressionlessly moved his bedding to the study. In fact, at that moment, I already regretted marrying him, but deep down, I still held onto a sliver of hope. Given enough time, he would surely change his mind. Later, I became pregnant. Upon learning this, Wen Qinian, for once, showed me a gentle expression. He told me to take good care of my health and even went out of his way to make me happy. That was the warmest period of time between him and me. But this warmth did not last long. It was the 3rd year since the princess had married into the northern desert. The palace coup came suddenly, and the king of the northern desert passed away. according to the customs of the northern desert, the princess was to marry the new king of the northern desert, bringing along her 1-year-old daughter and the unborn child in her womb. This was undoubtedly a great humiliation for the royal sister. Upon learning of this, Wen Qinian volunteered to lead troops to wage war against the northern desert and bring back the princess. The emperor, out of pity for the loyal and heroic service of the entire Wen family, had previously granted Wen Qinian a special exemption from ever having to go to the battlefield. At that time, it was winter, and the northern desert's troops were strong and highly adapted to the cold climate. To go to war at this moment would undoubtedly be fraught with peril. But perhaps out of deep love for his daughter, the emperor agreed to send troops. At that time, I was already 2 months pregnant, and I tearfully begged Wen Qinian not to go. Never in my life had I been so humbled. In front of tens of thousands of soldiers, I set aside my pride as a princess, knelt down, and clung to his leg, begging him to stay. There were other generals in Dhe who could lead troops besides him. But Wen Qinian simply ordered the maidservant to take me back without any expression on his face, then mounted his horse without looking back. In the days that followed, I lived in constant fear, terrified that he would die on the battlefield. I have lost count of how many bowls of miscarriage-preventing medicine I have drunk. It was not until I was 9 months pregnant that news of victory arrived from the front lines. Wen Qinian had won, capturing 13 cities in the northern desert in succession. On the day of his triumphant return, the people lined the streets to welcome him. I had wanted to go and see it too, but I was about to give birth. Perhaps due to long-standing depression, I had a difficult labor. Before Wen Qinian could lead the army into the city, I died in a pool of blood. Before closing my eyes, I used all my strength to take one last look at my child, who had no breath from the moment he was born. A tear slid down the corner of the eye. I'm so tired. If there's a next life, I never want to like Wen Qinian again. Opening my eyes again, I found myself standing on the palace path. This is the way to the Hall of Diligent Governance. The past events flashed through my mind like a revolving lantern. It took me a while to realize that I had been reborn. Qiu Hua looked at me and asked in confusion, "Princess, why have you stopped?" Only then did I realize that this must be on my way to ask my father, the emperor, to grant me a marriage with Wen Qinian. Before I could fully regain my composure, a man dressed in black robes approached me head-on. Wen Qinian hurried over and stopped right in front of me. "Linen, do not ask His Majesty to arrange a marriage for us." His tone was commanding from the very first words he spoke. "The one I love is Princess Linhua. Even if you go to beg His Majesty to arrange a marriage for us, I will never like you." With these words, what else could I not understand? Wen Qinian, he has also been reborn. Seeing that I remained silent, Wen Qinian's expression grew a bit more impatient, and he continued on his own. "Linen, I know you are afraid of marrying into the northern desert, which is why you are so eager to seek the emperor's decree for our marriage. Rest assured, I will help you. I promise I will not let you go for a political marriage. There is just one thing. I hope you will not ask the emperor to decree our marriage. If you insist on acting willfully, then let me make this clear. Even if you do marry me, you will certainly not live a contented life. I advise you to think carefully before making a decision. Has the Marquis lost his mind?" I spoke lightly. "In broad daylight, not only do you directly call me by my name, but you also come to say such inexplicable things. You even presumptuously tell me not to marry you. Wen Qinian, you truly have quite the audacity." Wen Qinian was taken aback, then as if finally coming to his senses, he realized that I was no longer the me from my previous life. He took 2 steps back and bowed to me. "Princess Linen, please forgive my offense. I spoke out of turn just now, but I hope your highness will reconsider what I said earlier." I let out a cold laugh and walked past him. In truth, if Wen Qinian had thought it through carefully, he would have realized that since my father had not yet made the matter of the marriage proposal from the northern desert public, how could I have known about it in advance? And in my previous life, I never married him just to avoid a political marriage. Seeing that I refused to return, Wen Qinian's face instantly darkened. "If your highness insists on this, then do not blame me for not warning you today." Hearing the warning from behind, I didn't even pause my steps. I do indeed wish to ask my father for an imperial decree. However, this time, what I seek is not an edict for marriage with Wen Qinian. When I entered the Hall of Diligent Governance, my father was reviewing memorials. I stepped forward and bowed. "Your son pays respects to your majesty." The emperor raised his eyes and closed the memorial in his hand. "Why do you have time to come see me today, Linen? Aren't you usually busy chasing after that boy from the Wen family all day long?" I deliberately lowered my head in feigned embarrassment. "Father, you're teasing me again," the emperor sighed. "I heard that your mother has been selecting a consort for you recently, and she is quite fond of your cousin from your uncle's family. I wonder what Linen thinks, if you truly like the young Marquis Wen. How about I arrange a marriage for you too? In my previous life, my father said the same thing. At that time, I agreed without a second thought. Father, to be honest, I don't actually like Wen Qinian that much." I walked behind my father with a smile and began massaging his shoulders. "The reason I came today is actually to ask for an imperial decree from you." "Oh, what kind of decree do you want? Tell me about it." I knelt down once again in the center of the hall, bowing respectfully to my father. "The emperor, I, your son, voluntarily request to marry into the northern desert in exchange for peace between our two nations." The emperor furrowed his brow. "The matter of the northern desert seeking a princess in marriage has not been made public. How did you come to know of it?" At this time in my previous life, the news had indeed not yet been released, but I had already prepared my explanation on the way here. "Your Majesty, yesterday when I went to the Eastern Palace to find my elder brother, I happened to overhear it outside his study. At that time, my elder brother was troubled by this matter. I am also your Majesty's child, a princess of the Great Qi. As I enjoy your Majesty's affection and the offerings of the people, it is only right that I share your Majesty's worries." Yet, the emperor's brow remained furrowed. "Linen, you are my most beloved princess. Even if I had to send a princess for a political marriage, I would not choose you. Your willingness is enough, and I am already deeply comforted." "No." I lifted my head, meeting the emperor's gaze directly. "In recent days, I have read historical records, which state that since the founding of the Great Qi, 8 princesses have been sent to marry into the northern tribes. None of these princesses lived past the age of 40. The northern tribes have always sought to marry princesses from our Great Qi, yet they have never treated them well. I know that your Majesty is a benevolent ruler, unwilling to start a war lightly and cause the people to suffer. Therefore, sending a princess for a political marriage is the best way to maintain peace between the two nations, but I still feel it is unjust for the princesses who died in foreign lands. Therefore, I volunteer to marry into a foreign nation, hoping to see for myself if I can find a permanent solution, so that the princesses of our Great Qi in future generations will no longer have to marry far away." With these words, I bowed my head to the ground. The emperor remained silent for a long time before finally agreeing. A look of relief appeared on his face. "My daughter has grown up." Early the next morning, as I was washing up, Qiu Hua came in with a basin of hot water, her head hanging low. Seeing her unusual demeanor, I casually asked, "What's wrong? You look so downcast." Qiu Hua said indignantly, "I just heard that young Marquis Wen, during the morning court session, publicly asked His Majesty for Princess Linhua's hand in marriage in front of all the civil and military officials." My rinsing motion paused for a moment, then I smiled in understanding, perhaps fearing that the imperial sister would be sent off for a political marriage as in the previous life. "When Qinian was in such a hurry, what does someone else's business have to do with you?" Qiu Hua pouted. "But young Marquis Wen clearly knows that your highness likes him." "So what?" I smiled. "The one he has always loved is the imperial sister, and besides, I no longer like him now." "Qiu Hua, I know you are speaking out of indignation for me, but please do not say such things again in the future." That morning, the people from the Department of Garments came to take my measurements for the wedding dress and phoenix crown. Suddenly, the 5th imperial princess ran into the hall, crying. I quickly dismissed the people from the Department of Garments. "Elder sister, I'm scared." She clung to my arm, crying uncontrollably. I quickly comforted her, waiting until the 5th princess finally stopped crying before asking, "Who has bullied our Linju? Tell your elder sister, and I will teach them a lesson for you." Concubine Shu came from a humble background, yet she treated me exceptionally well. Whenever my mother punished me as a child, I would always go to Concubine Shu's palace. She would always bring me delicious pastries. Because of this, my relationship with Linju was particularly close. Even in my previous life, when I was on my deathbed, it was she who left the palace to accompany me. I heard from people in the palace that during today's morning court, several ministers jointly petitioned to send me to the northern desert for a marriage alliance. As she spoke, Linju couldn't help but start sobbing again. I've heard that the people of the northern desert are extremely cruel. And the place is covered in ice and snow everywhere. Once I go, there will be no chance of ever returning, elder sister. I'm truly terrified. My eyes turned cold, and I gave a meaningful glance to Chiohua beside me. Go and find out what exactly is going on. Your servant will go at once. Chiohua hurriedly left the hall. I ordered someone to bring in the sour plum soup that Linju usually loves the most, telling her to calm down a bit. Soon, Chiohua returned. What happened? Did you find out clearly? Reporting to the princess, I asked the palace attendants on duty at the Golden Luan Hall. It is said that young Marquis Wen took the lead in advising that Princess Linju be sent to marry the Northern Desert in exchange for long-term peace between the two countries. I suddenly remembered the promise Wen Qian had made to me that day, that he would not let me go for a marriage alliance. He had it all planned out back then, his fists clenched unconsciously. I never knew Wen Qian was such a despicable person. Linju is only 13 this year, and he already wants to send a princess who hasn't even come of age to marry for political alliance. If he had volunteered to lead troops to fight in the northern deserts today, I might have thought more highly of him. Indeed, in his previous life, he lost an arm on the battlefield while trying to bring back the princess. Now that his lifelong wish has been fulfilled, he naturally has no desire to suffer on the battlefield again. I looked up and saw Linju's tear-reddened eyes and uneasy expression. I thought about it and decided to give her some reassurance. Don't worry, father won't make you marry for political alliance. Linju was puzzled. I smiled and patted her head, because the marriage decree was already written long ago, and it bears my name. Every year, my father holds the autumn hunt in the royal hunting grounds. This year will likely be my last autumn hunt in Dhe. Early in the morning, my elder brother sent over the riding attire specially made for me. I took the clothes and held them up against myself. I looked at myself in the bronze mirror again and again, sighing with emotion. It's been a long time since I've worn such a bright color. Chiohua quipped. Has your highness forgotten? Last month, for the empress's birthday, you wore a water-red cloud-patterned silk dress. I smiled. Chiohua has no memories of her past life, so naturally, she wouldn't know. In my previous life, because when Chinian once said he liked the color of the sky, I never wore bright-colored clothes again. It was only later that I realized the color of the sky was the same as the dress my elder sister wore on the day he first met her. Before the autumn hunt began, the emperor waved his hand grandly and said with a laugh, "Whoever claims the first kill today may ask me for a reward." The crowd erupted in cheers. I rode my horse into the forest and soon spotted a white fox. Chasing after it, the white fox stopped behind the bushes. Just as I was about to nock an arrow, one flew past me faster. I turned back in displeasure, meeting Wen Qinyan's gaze directly. Beside him was my second elder sister, also dressed in riding attire. Wen Qinyan set down his bow, dismounted from his horse, and stepped forward to lift the injured white fox. He said to the imperial elder sister, "The fur of this white fox is of excellent quality, perfect for making a fox fur cloak for the princess." The imperial elder sister glanced at me and shook her head at Wen Qinyan. This white fox was discovered by fourth imperial sister first, so it should be given to her. I furrowed my brows and was about to say it wasn't necessary, when Qinyan frowned at me, seemingly quite displeased. Princess Linen always seems to enjoy taking what belongs to others. His words were full of aggression. It reminded me of my previous life, that night when he got drunk because the princess was sent away for a political marriage. Back then, I brought him back from the study and was about to help him bathe, but when Qinyan pushed me away abruptly, and I lost my balance and fell to the ground, he just looked down at me from above. He questioned, "Does the princess feel a great sense of accomplishment in seizing what belongs to others?" At that time, I didn't understand and just remained silent. I thought it was just the ramblings of a drunken man. Looking back now, the someone else's thing he mentioned actually referred to himself. He blamed me for separating him and the princess. But hearing these words again now, I no longer remained silent. I took out an arrow, raised my arm, and drew the bow. Whoosh! The arrow grazed past Wen Qinyan's ear, leaving a bloody mark on his earlobe. then it landed squarely on the rabbit not far behind him. What this princess wants. She doesn't need to snatch, she only needs to take it openly and honestly. With those words, I ignored Wen Qinyan's shocked and angry expression, spurred my horse, and charged deep into the forest. When the hunt ended, the crown prince, my elder brother, had bagged the most game. The emperor laughed heartily. Truly worthy of being my crown prince. Speak, what reward do you desire? Upon hearing this, the crown prince turned his gaze toward me. I have no particular desires. Why not bestow this reward upon the fourth princess instead? Instantly, everyone's eyes turned to me. I immediately accepted. Then I thank your highness, my elder brother. Father also looked towards me. Linen, what reward would you like? I stood up, and as I passed by Wen Qinyan's seat, he suddenly whispered, Princess Linen. I am already betrothed to Princess Linhua. I glanced at him but said nothing. I merely wore a contemptuous smile on my face. I walked straight past him and knelt before my father. Your Majesty, I do indeed have a request. Oh, then tell me about it. I beckoned Qiu Hua over. My personal maid, Qiu Hua, has grown up with me since childhood. She and the Assistant Minister of the Court of Judicial Review, Lord Qin, are deeply in love. I wish to ask your Majesty to bestow a marriage upon them. The Assistant Minister of the Court of Judicial Review, Qin Yuan, was also the study companion of my elder brother, the Crown Prince. I do not know when Qiu Hua first crossed paths with him. I only know that in my previous life, Qin Yuan had repeatedly sought to marry Qiu Hua, but she could not bear to leave me alone in the Marquis's household. Thus, she repeatedly declined, willingly staying by my side, now that I am about to marry far away, with an uncertain future ahead. I do not wish for Qiu Hua to leave her homeland and accompany me. At this moment, Qin Yuan also stepped forward and knelt down. Your Majesty, I truly admire Miss Qiu Hua. Qiu Hua gently tugged at my sleeve, her face full of anxiety. Princess, have I made a mistake? Why do you want to marry me off? She still doesn't know that I am about to leave the capital, and I have no intention of telling her. I just smiled and patted her hand. Could it be that this princess simply wishes to achieve a good marriage? Seeing this, the emperor was very pleased and granted his permission. Since you are a pair of lovers, I shall bestow a marriage upon you both upon my return to the palace. Qin Yuan quickly pulled Qiu Hua to express their gratitude, then turned and bowed to me. I thank your highness the princess for your gracious consent. I fixed him with a half-warning gaze. Don't thank me too soon. If you treat Qiu Hua poorly, I will certainly not let you off lightly. On the way back to the city, I did not ride a horse. The carriage moved slowly, and just as I was about to fall asleep, the curtain was suddenly lifted. When Qinyan's voice sounded in my ear, the princess married off Qiu Hua, so in the future, won't you be without a trusted person to serve you? This sentence instantly snapped me awake. I looked at him inexplicably. Back when we were husband and wife, for 3 years he never showed me a shred of concern. Now that we have no ties, he suddenly comes to inquire about my affairs. It's truly baffling. This princess's matters are no concern of young Marquis. When Qinian opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something more, but I had already lowered the carriage curtain. 2 days later, the envoy sent by the Northern Desert to welcome the bride arrived in the capital. During the morning court session, my father announced the news of my impending marriage alliance with the Northern Desert. The Imperial Garment Bureau delivered the hastily made wedding dress and phoenix crown. Please, princess, try on the wedding dress. If there are any parts that don't fit, we will go back and make adjustments right away. A dozen maids stood before me in 2 rows. My gaze swept over the trays they held in their hands. I stood up and walked to the bronze mirror, spreading my arms wide. Help me put on the wedding dress. Before long, the reflection in the mirror had transformed. A bright red wedding gown, adorned with a phoenix crown, an indescribable elegance and grandeur. No need to change it. The wedding dress fits perfectly. If that's the case, then I shall take my leave with them. After saying this, the matron from the clothing department led the group away. Once I had admired it enough, I called for someone to help me change. A commotion arose outside the bedchamber. The voice of the door-guarding maid carried a sense of urgency. Young Marquis, this is the princess's bedchamber. Without the princess's permission, you cannot enter. Step aside. When Qinyan's irritable voice reached her ears, the next moment, the palace door was kicked open. When Qinian barged in, ignoring the maid's attempts to stop him. The two maids guarding the door hurriedly knelt and pleaded for forgiveness. "We beg for your highness's mercy, Lord." Wen refused to listen to our attempts to stop him and insisted on forcing his way in. I waved my hand dismissively. "You may leave." Then he turned to Wen Qinian and scolded him coldly. "How dare you? Do you know what crime it is to trespass into this princess's bedchamber?" However, Wen Qinian ignored my question, his eyes fixed intently on me. His gaze grew even deeper as it fell upon the wedding dress I wore and the phoenix crown atop my head. Why did the princess volunteer for the marriage alliance? Does the princess know that the northern desert is bitterly cold, and that food, clothing, and daily necessities are all different from those in Great Qi? Does the princess know that the northern desert royal family is intricate and complex, and that once you go, it may be difficult to return to the capital? A series of questions were thrown at me. I just stood there indifferently, my gaze remaining cold throughout. "Wen Qinian, you have overstepped your bounds. If you do not leave now, do not blame me for reporting your disrespectful behavior today to the emperor." Wen Qinian's frown deepened, but his tone suddenly softened. "Linen, is it because I proposed to Lin Hua that you deliberately chose to marry into a foreign alliance out of spite? If that's the case, then as long as I agree to marry you, will you give up the idea of marrying into the foreign tribe?" With each word he spoke, his eyes grew redder. I was amused by his words. "You marry me? What about the princess? Should she marry into the northern desert? And then you go to the battlefield for her again?" When Qinian stepped back in shock, his eyes were filled with disbelief. "Linen, you too?" "Yes." I curled my lips into a mocking smile. "So, Wen Qinian, there's no need for you to put on an act in front of me. What kind of person you are, I saw clearly in my previous life with my own life and that of my child. Now that I have been given another chance, you may go and seek what you could not obtain in your past life. As for anything else, you have no control over it, nor do you have the right to interfere." With that, I turned and walked into the inner hall. "Attendants, see the guest out." Qiuhua pushed the door open and gestured for Wen Qinian to enter. "Marquis, please." Wen Qinian brushed Qiuhua aside. He suddenly lifted his foot and quickly caught up. "Linen." I paused in my steps, not turning around, only replying impatiently, "I've made myself perfectly clear, Wen Qinian. Do you really want me to call the Imperial Guards to have you thrown out?" Wen Qinian stood in place, taking a deep breath. It seemed as though he had made an immense resolution. "If I told you that, in my previous life, I actually fell in love with you." I suddenly clenched my sleeve tightly and turned back to look at him. "Wen Qinian, you say you love me?" "Yes," he admitted. I suddenly laughed, laughing for a long time, then I quickly stepped forward and slapped him hard across the face. Wen Qinian was struck so hard that his head snapped to the side. "Linen, if this can lessen your resentment toward me, then go ahead and hit me. So you do know that I resent you. Wen Qinian, do you know, hearing you say you love me is even more disgusting than knowing you don't love me." Wen Qinian froze, staring at me in a daze. "The one thing I regret most in my past life is falling in love with you and marrying you. I gave you the chance to hurt me myself. Wen Qinian, what makes you think someone like you, who tramples on sincerity, is worth my love for 2 lifetimes? 2 days later, my carriage left the city with the wedding procession from the northern desert. I lifted my veil and looked outside through the fluttering carriage curtain. The streets were lined with common people on both sides. This is the place where I have lived for 16 years. Now I am about to travel far to another country. If all goes well, perhaps I will have the fortune to return. If things don't go well, this should be my last glimpse of the capital." A clamor rose from the rear of the carriage procession, the clatter of horse hooves drawing nearer and nearer. Finally, it came to a halt extremely close to me. The carriage was halted. The carriage curtain was lifted, and the crown prince, my elder brother, stood atop a fine horse. "Linen, if you regret this now, I will do everything in my power to keep you in the capital." My usually composed elder brother now wore an expression of deep anxiety. Seeing me smile at him, he couldn't help but emphasize his words once more. "You are the legitimate princess of Qi. You don't need to go for a political marriage. Linen, think carefully. Are you really willing to go to the distant Morbei?" "Brother, I know you mean well for me, but my mind is made up. Please go back quickly. If mother finds out you've acted so impulsively, she will surely scold you." After saying this, I instructed the coachman to continue the journey. From afar, I saw my brother's horse still standing in place, watching in my direction. I didn't want to look any longer. As I lowered the carriage curtain, a tear slipped from the corner of my eye. In my second year of marriage to the northern desert, the king of the northern desert fell gravely ill and could no longer leave his bed. As the queen, it was my duty to care for him closely. One night, I had just finished washing up, sitting in front of the dressing table, combing my hair. Light footsteps sounded behind me. Immediately after, a pair of strong arms wrapped around me from behind. I fell into a solid chest. The combing motion paused. Through the bronze mirror in front of me, I saw Tuoba Yarrow leaning down, his face close to the back of my neck. A palm with a slight callus slowly moved upward from my waist. I nearly cried out in surprise and quickly turned around to push the person behind me away. Lowering my voice, I said, "Are you crazy? This is the royal hall." With that, I cast a rather worried glance toward the inner chamber. Fortunately, the king of the northern desert was not awakened by the noise. Tuoba Yarrow, seeing how cautious I was, let out a disdainful snort. "What are you afraid of? He won't wake up anyway." I frowned. "Did you increase his dosage again?" Tuoba Yarrow remained silent, which was as good as an admission. "You're truly mad. If anyone finds out, don't drag me into it." "Don't worry." After speaking, Tuoba Yarrow suddenly picked me up horizontally and walked towards the side room. I was somewhat displeased. "I am your mother, and this is the royal hall. You should show some restraint." "Is that so?" Tuoba Yarrow glanced down at me. "Soon. You won't be anymore." He kicked open the door to the side room, and all the servants who had been attending nearby had already been dismissed. I was placed into the central hot spring pool by Tuoba Yarrow. The swirling mist concealed everything in the room. I came to the northern desert not to become a sacrificial offering. I also knew full well that seeking to marry the princess of Great Chi was merely a pretense. The northern desert had long wanted to wage war against the Great Chi, but they were simply unable to find a suitable reason. Perhaps even the king of the northern desert did not expect that the Great Chi would actually agree to his unreasonable demand. After all, the last princess who married into the northern desert lived for less than 10 years. The current king of the northern desert is already over 60 years old. It's laughable to say, his own birth mother was also a princess of Great Chi. Yet he detested women from the Central Plains to the extreme. On our wedding night, he subjected me to endless humiliation. He made me kneel by the bedside all night long. Seeing my expression of silent endurance, he sneered, "Women from the Central Plains have always been lowly." I did not refute him. I just proceeded with greater caution in the days that followed. After 2 months of observation, I ultimately set my sights on Tuoba Yarrow, the 5th son of the king of the northern desert. From what I've heard these days, he is the son most favored by the king of the northern desert, but he is also the son the king fears the most. This is because Tuoba Yarrow's birth mother came from a humble background, yet she was deeply cherished by the king of the northern desert. As a result, she incurred the jealousy of the previous queen of the northern desert, who gave her away to one of the king's ministers. The king of the northern desert did not stop her, and in the end, Tuoba Yarrow's birth mother, unable to bear the humiliation, threw herself into the river and drowned. It is said that the previous princess of the northern desert was seemingly assassinated, but in reality, the masked assassin was none other than Tuoba Yarrow, and it is precisely such a person that I am looking for. 6 months ago, during the grassland horse race, Tuoba Yarrow outperformed many grassland warriors and won. Just as he asked who else wanted to compete, I raised my riding crop high and rode my horse to his side. "Does the 5th prince dare to compete with me?" "You?" Tuoba Yarrow sneered. "The princess from the Central Plains." "Yes, I am the princess from the Central Plains." "What? Does the 5th prince not dare to race with me?" Above the grassland, a burly man raised a wicked smile. "Delicate princess, don't cry if you lose." As soon as the words fell, a burst of laughter erupted all around. They all looked at me with mocking gazes. My gaze sharpened, and I raised the whip high, striking it on Tuoba Yarrow's horse. I then spurred my horse to follow closely. Tuoba Yarrow reacted swiftly. Having grown up on horseback since childhood, I naturally couldn't match him. Just as everyone thought I was certain to lose, Tuoba Yarrow's horse suddenly foamed at the mouth and collapsed to the ground. I seized the opportunity to press my advantage and defeated him. Finally, I walked up to him with my chin held high, looking down at him from above. You people from the northern deserts are nothing special. Tuoba Yaro's eyes were filled with ferocity, fixed intently on me. His gaze held a dangerous intent to kill, but I paid him no mind and walked straight away. Of course, I knew I had offended him, but only in this way could I get his attention the fastest. That night, Tuoba Yaro climbed through the window into my bedchamber. Before I could react, a dagger was pressed against my neck. He smiled like a ghostly apparition. I never knew that the methods of you Central Plains people could be so despicable. I lowered my gaze to the dagger in his hand, showing not a trace of fear in my eyes. Instead, I sized him up. I'm not sure about the methods of other Central Plains people, but among the men of the northern deserts, few are as robust as you. Tuoba Yaro's fierce expression cracked for a moment, but soon, he exerted force. And the sharp dagger cut through my skin. Trickles of blood seeped out. You poisoned my horse. How are you going to make it up to me? Make it up to you. What do you want? I smiled brightly. How about I offer myself to you as compensation? Tuoba Yaro's gaze deepened. Are you trying to seduce me? You can interpret it that way. I raised my hand to brush away the dagger that had already loosened its grip, then wrapped both arms around his neck, according to the customs of your Morbay. If the Morbay king passes away, the queen will marry the next Morbay king. Tuoba Yaro nodded. Yes. I leaned in even closer, my lips almost touching his face. Your father's health has been growing weaker lately, and it seems he won't live much longer. If I must marry again, I hope it will be you. The temperature in the hot spring pool rose inch by inch. Tuoba Yaro's robust chest was covered in beads of sweat. He held me tightly in his arms, his scorching breath brushing against the side of my neck. Linen, give me a child. In the place where he couldn't see, my gaze grew increasingly profound. Amidst the murmuring flow of water, I heard my own voice emerge from the mist. Okay, in my previous life, the king of the northern desert died in the 3rd year after the royal sisters' marriage alliance, but the exact cause of his death remains unclear to me. But in this life, it was because of me, at my instigation. Tuoba Yaro began poisoning the food of the king of Morbay. Perhaps no one in the entire royal court knew that the shaman the king of Morbay trusted the most was actually Tuoba Yaro's man. 2 months later, I became pregnant, learning from the lessons of my previous life. I was especially careful during my pregnancy. Upon hearing the news, Tuoba Yaro was overjoyed, and his actions quickened even more. On an ordinary night, the gravely ill king of the northern desert never woke up again. That night, chaos erupted in the royal court. Tuoba Yaro was well prepared, and after a night of fierce fighting, he successfully became the new king of the northern desert. In the early days of his succession, Tuoba Yaro was extremely busy, often returning to his bedchamber late into the night. On this particular night, just as I was about to fall asleep, I sensed an unfamiliar presence in the inner chamber. Without making a sound, I stepped back and drew the long sword beside me. Who is it? As my words fell, a figure dressed as a palace attendant of the royal court emerged from behind the screen. He slowly raised his head, revealing the face of Wenchinian. It's you. Wenchinian nodded. He was about to speak when his gaze suddenly swept over my slightly swollen abdomen. His pupils suddenly contracted for a moment. You are with child. I ignored his nonsense and simply asked, what are you doing here? Did my brother send you? Apart from that, I couldn't think of any reason why Wenchinian would appear here. Wenchinian shook his head, his gaze fixed intently on me. Linen, I just wanted to see you and tell you to wait a little longer. I will take you home. There's no need. My affairs don't require your involvement, nor do I need you to do anything for me. Wenchinian, you don't need to be so sentimental. I advise you to leave this place as soon as possible. If Tuoba Yaro finds out, I doubt you'll make it back alive to see the princess. Wenchinian shook his head, his gaze seemingly fixed on me. My engagement to Princess Linhua has been called off. I was somewhat surprised. He continued, it was only after you left the capital that I realized everything had been a misunderstanding. Princess Linhua harbored no affection for me either. The reason I was fond of her was because, when I was young and entered the palace as a study companion for the crown prince, although I lived in the palace, I was often secretly mistreated by the nanny who attended to me. She never beat or scolded me, but she frequently withheld my food. I remember the day I met Princess Linhua. It was a fine sunny day. I was crouching in the corner, and she walked over to me, handing me a bag of walnut cakes. So, what exactly are you trying to say? I was growing a bit impatient. By my calculations, Tuoba Yarrow should be back by now, when Chinian took a few steps closer to me, gazing at me with a tender expression. Half a year ago, Princess Linhua fell in love with the newly appointed Tanhua at first sight and went to beg His Majesty to cancel my marriage with her. It was also then that I learned from her that the package of walnut cakes that day was actually sent to me by you. Linen, I know that in both lifetimes, I have wronged you, but I have already realized my mistake. Can you give me another chance to make it up to you? I have done my best to request His Majesty's permission for me to lead troops to attack Morbay. Don't worry, it won't be long before I come to take you away. When Chinian, don't you think it's meaningless to say these things to me now? I looked at him with a mocking gaze. When Chinian's eager expression froze. I don't need you to be my savior, and Father will never allow you to lead troops to wage war against the northern desert, of course. The most important point is that I will never like you again, whether you like my elder sister or not. All I will ever feel for you is disgust and hatred, never love. So go back. If your presence brings me trouble, I won't mind killing you with my own hands. In the spring of the following year, I successfully gave birth to a boy. He was named Tuoba. Tuoba Yarrow was overjoyed. He stayed by my bedside, holding my hand tightly. Linen, we have a child. I weakly stroked his face, forcing a faint smile. Yes, we have a child. Quickly bring the baby to me so I can see. Tuoba Yarrow hurriedly nodded, took the swaddled infant from the wet nurse beside him, and brought it before me. Look, Linen, he looks more like you, Tuoba Yarrow said. Then suddenly his expression changed. What's wrong with you? I asked him. Tuoba Yarrow didn't speak, just hurriedly put the child down, took a few steps back, and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, without any warning, he fainted. The palace attendants inside the hall were all startled. I quickly had someone help Tuoba Yarrow onto the bed and called for the shaman doctor. After the shaman doctor examined him, he hurriedly came to report to me, Your Majesty, the king's health is not seriously ill. As for the vomiting of blood just now, it is likely due to excessive fatigue in recent days. I nodded. Then I can rest assured. Since that incident of coughing up blood, Tuoba Yarrow's health has never been the same. He often coughs, and even in the heat of June, he still wears a heavy cloak. In the year Tuoba turned 3, Tuoba Yarrow took 2 concubines. I didn't have much of a reaction when I found out. Seeing this, Tuoba Yarrow furrowed his brows. Linen, aren't you angry? Holding the child, I didn't even look up. With the addition of beauties to the king's harem, I should be happy for you. Tuoba Yarrow's expression grew even darker. He snatched the child from my arms and handed it to the wet nurse. Then he pulled me onto his lap, staring at me intently. You're not even angry. Do you not love me? I pushed him away, put away my earlier smile, and looked at him coldly. If I were angry, would you send her away? Tuoba Yarrow pursed his lips. No, ha, I sneered, turning to leave, but my wrist was grabbed. Linen, I won't touch them. This is just a temporary measure to subdue the Nayland family. I curled my lips and sat back down on his lap. Really? Tuoba Yarrow smiled. When have I ever lied to you? As he spoke, he coughed a few more times. I picked up the warm water from the table and fed it to him. Should we call for a shaman to take a look? No need, it's an old ailment. With that, he drank the water in one gulp. I wiped the water from the corner of his lips, lowering my gaze to hide the complexity in my eyes. Another year passed, from spring to winter. For some reason, Tuoba Yarrow's body grew increasingly weak. He would vomit blood almost every other day, yet the witch doctors could never diagnose the problem. Now, Tuoba Yarrow could no longer get out of bed and could only review memorials from his sickbed. He often held my hand, teaching me how to handle political affairs. I also studied very diligently. Finally, on the day Tuoba turned 5 years old, Tuoba Yarrow could no longer hold on and passed away. Fortunately, he had already made arrangements during his lifetime. As soon as he passed away, his old subordinates immediately proclaimed his only child, Tuoba, as the new king of Morbay, and I became the Empress Dowager, ruling from behind the curtain. The new king has ascended the throne, and there are many affairs of state to attend to. It was nearly midnight when I returned to my bedchamber. Lifting the curtain to the inner chamber, I saw a robust and handsome man lying on the bed. What was even more surprising was that this man looked exactly like the deceased former king. Seeing me enter, Tuoba Yarrow raised his eyes, staring at me intently, like a fierce beast spotting its prey. "So all these years of my frail health have been your doing?" "Yes," I admitted without hesitation. Upon hearing this, Tuoba Yarrow was so angry he wanted to rush over and pounce on me. However, his limbs were tightly bound, making it impossible for him to move at all. I didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. Sitting by the bed, I gently stroked his face with my fingers. "Tuoba Yarrow, didn't you say you love me? Since you love me, what's wrong with giving up everything for me? Linen, you're truly insane." Tuoba Yarrow's voice was filled with rage. "Even if you didn't do this, my throne would have been Eunice in the future. Why did you feed me a fake death potion?" A faint smile still hung on my face as I patiently explained to him. "Only when the northern desert is completely under my control can I ensure peace between our two nations for the next few decades. Tuoba Yarrow, I really did want to kill you at first, but what can I do? It seems I've truly fallen in love with you, so I couldn't bear to let you die. Of course, if you wish, you can go out immediately and tell the world that you are still alive. In that case, I will be executed, for I am the murderer who plotted against the king of Morbay." As I spoke, I untied the ropes binding his hands and feet. "All right, you may leave now." Tuoba Yarrow gave me a deep look, then stood up and walked toward the outer chamber. I closed my eyes. Just as the dagger in my sleeve was about to be drawn, the person behind me turned back. Tuoba Yarrow suddenly pushed me onto the bed, pressing down on me. Without a word, he bit my lips. "Linen, you're just counting on the fact that I can't bear to let you die." I curved my lips into a smile, offering no further explanation, and simply responded to him with equal fervor. When Tuoba Yun was 10 years old, I took him back to Dhe for a visit. My elder brother, the crown prince, had ascended the throne 2 years prior. Hearing that I was returning to the capital, he brought all the officials to the city gate early in the morning to welcome me. During the banquet, my elder brother suggested that I take a few handsome men back to the northern desert. I quickly declined, but when I returned to my palace at night, Tuoba Yarrow still threw a tantrum and made sarcastic remarks for quite a while. I spent most of the night trying to calm her down. After staying in the capital for nearly half a month, I set off back to the northern desert. Just as I was about to leave the city, when Chinian came galloping after me on horseback, I heard that he had never married all these years. "Linen, I heard that you haven't accepted any of the male consorts His Majesty selected for you. How about taking me back to the northern desert instead?" When Chinian stood in front of my carriage, shouting loudly, I have no idea where he got such confidence. Before I could even speak, Tuoba Yarrow stepped out of the carriage with a dark expression and gave Wen Chinian a thorough beating right there in the street. In the end, the person was directly carried to the medical clinic. Feeling heartbroken, seeing that I had been silent all along, Tuoba Yarrow asked with dissatisfaction. I smiled and leaned into his embrace. "Yeah, I'm worried if your hand hurts from hitting." That concludes the first story. Don't go away, the next story is even more exciting. My fiancé returned from the battlefield, not only having lost the war but also crippled in one leg, his bright future completely ruined. I followed the family's orders to break off the engagement, but suddenly a line of text floated before my eyes. What a foolish supporting character. The male lead is destined to become a prince of a different surname in the future. If you humiliate him by breaking off the engagement now, you'll end up disfigured, thrown into a beggar's den, and starved to death. Such a perfect start. Yet you're playing your cards so poorly, I was scared half to death. Meeting Chi Chen's gloomy gaze, I didn't mention a word about breaking off the engagement. Only asking after his well-being. I am the legitimate daughter of the Shen family. My father is a minor 7th rank official in the court. Apart from attending court on the 1st and 15th of each month, he spends every day studying how to curry favor and climb the social ladder. As his most valuable asset, he went to great lengths to secure an excellent marriage for me. The legitimate son of General Qi, a 2nd rank official in the current court, is my fiancé. To put it this way, when my father attends court, he can't even see General Qi's heels. Yet, thanks to this marriage arrangement, my father can pat General Qi on the shoulder after court and call him in-law. But just yesterday, this excellent marriage arrangement encountered an unexpected turn. The news of General Qi's defeat reached the capital. and along with it came the reports of the deaths of General Qi and his wife, as well as the news that Qi Chen had lost a leg. Immediately, my father felt as if his world had collapsed. To avoid being implicated by the Qi family, he urged me to break off the engagement with Qi Chen as quickly as possible. A dead cripple still dares to dream of marrying my daughter. Dream on, don't be sad, Shushu. Once this storm passes, I'll definitely find you an excellent match. I fully agreed with my father. I had no intention of marrying a cripple, so early the next morning, I set off with the butler, out of guilt. I also had him bring along some nourishing medicinal herbs. Upon arriving at the Qi residence, the butler, dressed in white, came to open the door. As we walked in, the vast Qi estate felt empty and desolate. Even though people were still around, it gave off an atmosphere of decline and decay. I was thinking about finishing the matter quickly and heading home early, hoping to make it in time for the midday meal. Suddenly, the next moment, a line of text floated before my eyes. What a foolish supporting female character. If you break off the engagement now, you'll have no chance to cling to the powerful in the future. The male lead is destined to become the only non-royal prince in the future. If you humiliate him today, you'll end up disfigured, thrown into a beggar's den, and starved to death. What a perfect starting hand, and you've completely ruined it. How utterly foolish. I was so frightened that I froze in place. Still trying to figure out what these strange words meant, when I looked up and met a pair of gloomy eyes. Qi Chen sat under the eaves, dressed in pure white mourning clothes. His handsome face was so gaunt that his bones were visible, and his tightly pressed lips were pale and bloodless. I stiffened under his gaze, hearing him ask, "What brings you here, Miss Shen?" A chill ran down my spine, as if I were being watched by a predator that could snap my neck at any moment. Qi Chen was seated in a specially made chair, still preoccupied with the strange characters I had just seen. I blurted out, "I came to see you." "Oh, to see me? What for?" "To see if I have. I'm here to deliver medicinal herbs." I interrupted Qi Chen's words and had the butler bring over the herbs I had brought. Pointing at the large and small boxes of herbs on the ground, I forced a smile and said to Qi Chen, "I heard you were injured. I don't know if these will be useful. But please use them for now. I have matters to attend to at home, so I won't stay any longer. I'll come see you another day. You, make sure to eat well and take care of your health." After saying that, I turned and left, not daring to stay a moment longer. I felt as if I had run into a ghost. After returning from the Qi residence, I subtly asked the people who had been with me that day, and aside from me, no one else had seen those words. Those strange words only appeared that one time at the Qi residence and didn't show up again in the following days, leaving me utterly perplexed. But it's better to believe it than to dismiss it. The meaning conveyed between the lines was truly alarming. Perhaps, just like in the storybooks, this is a blessing bestowed upon me by fate. Without delay, I went to find my father that very night and told him I didn't want to call off the engagement. My father asked me why, and I said I was in love with Qi Chen. In short, "Father, I will marry no one but Qi Chen." Then, I was locked in the ancestral hall. My father stood outside the door, roaring, "How could someone as wise and mighty as me have given birth to such a foolish child? You stay in there and reflect on your actions." Butler, no food for her for 3 days. How could I be foolish enough to go hungry for 3 days? I ran away on the second night. Climbing out of the ancestral hall window and scaling the wall of the Shen residence, once outside, I headed straight for the Qi residence. When the Qi family butler brought me before Qi Chen, I was so dizzy and weak from hunger that I couldn't bear it any longer and collapsed right into Qi Chen's arms. When I woke up again, it was already noon the next day. Qi Chen was sitting by the bedside. Seeing me open my eyes, he asked in a puzzled tone, "The doctor said you fainted from hunger. What happened?" A young maid was standing nearby, holding a plate of pastries. I grabbed them and stuffed them into my mouth. After eating a few pieces, I finally felt like I had come back to life. I wiped my mouth, grabbed Qi Chen's sleeve with reddened eyes, and lowered my head, looking as if I couldn't bring myself to speak. My father said he wants to call off the engagement. I refused, so he locked me in the ancestral hall and wouldn't give me any food. Qi Chen was taken aback, his hands resting on his knees, trembling slightly. "You don't want to call off the engagement? Why, given the current situation, calling it off is the best choice. The general's mansion has already fallen. And your father is doing this for your own good." As I listened, I secretly glanced up at him. Though Qi Chen said these words, the fierce determination in his eyes was almost overflowing. I lowered my head again and continued in a pitiful tone, "No, I don't see it that way. Since we've made this commitment, we should share both honor and disgrace. I will not agree to call off the engagement." Qi Chen remained silent for a long time before casually saying, "Get some rest." Then he left. I immediately had the maid prepare a table of hot meals for me. I stayed at the Qi residence. And during that time, Qi Chen brought me news from home. Uncle Shun has been visiting the Minister of Revenue Song's residence frequently lately, and the two of them have been quite close. I knew exactly what was going on. He plans to arrange a marriage with the Minister of Revenue Song's family. My half-sister has been registered under my mother's name since birth, and she is about the same age as the Minister of Revenue Song's legitimate son. Qi Chen glanced at me but said nothing. I walked over and sat down beside him, grabbing his sleeve as I said, "Qi Chen, my father has already given up on me. You're all I have now." Qi Chen did not move. He sat in silence, his face still cold and indifferent, but I knew that in his current state, as long as he did not refuse me, it was a tacit agreement. In the days that followed, I accompanied Qi Chen in treating his leg. The process was agonizing. Qi Chen became increasingly moody and unpredictable, and all the renowned doctors we found from all over the country were driven away by his scolding. Out of 10 doctors who came, 9 said Qi Chen's leg could not be cured, and the remaining one, not wanting to be scolded, vaguely said it was up to fate. Qi Chen drove away all the doctors and sat alone in the room, head bowed and hair disheveled, looking like a madman. I pushed open the door, entered with the medicine, and placed the bowl in his hand. Meeting his bloodshot eyes, I spoke to him word by word. "There are so many doctors in the world. We'll see them one by one. If these don't work, we'll try the next batch. We're bound to find the right one. Qi Chen, don't give up." I tightly grasped Qi Chen's wrist. He took a deep breath, tilted his head back, and swallowed the medicine. I have more confidence in Qi Chen's leg recovery than he does himself. Qi Chen is destined to become the only non-royal prince in the Great Yong dynasty. A minor leg injury is nothing to worry about, and indeed, on an ordinary afternoon, a white-bearded old man knocked on the gate of the general's mansion, claiming he could cure Qi Chen's leg. Half a month later, Qi Chen was able to stand up. The moment Qi Chen stood up, I was almost moved to tears of joy. No one knows just how happy I was. Qi Chen took a handkerchief and gently wiped away my tears, his movements incredibly tender. I snatched the handkerchief from him, let out a fierce breath, and said, "To hell with this beggar's den. Whoever wants to live here can live here. I certainly won't." After Qi Chen's leg had fully recovered, he told me he was setting off for the border, heading to the battlefield, and asked me to wait for him at the estate. In my heart, "Shushu, you have long been my wife. Once I win the battle and earn military merits, I will marry you in a grand and glorious ceremony." I had no doubt about Qi Chen's words. "All right, go with peace of mind. I'll wait for you at the estate for your triumphant return." Qi Chen smiled and gently patted the top of my head. At that moment, familiar words began to drift before my eyes. TSK, TSK, TSK. I thought the female supporting character had gotten smarter, but it turns out she's still so foolish. Indeed, a supporting character will always be a supporting character. No matter how hard you try, you can never become the female lead. So just stay quietly in the capital while our male lead goes to the battlefield to meet his true destined one. I closed my shocked mouth and grabbed Qi Chen's arm tightly. "I'm going with you." Qi Chen smiled and patiently explained to me, "The battlefield is perilous, and besides, I am going to atone for my mistakes and earn merit, so the conditions are even harsher. I cannot bear to see you suffer. Shushu, you should just stay in the mansion and wait for me at ease. I'm not afraid of hardship. I just want to be with you." I sniffled and began to cry. Auntie could accompany uncle to the battlefield, so can I. I don't want to stay in the mansion, blind to everything, not knowing your news and spending day after day in worry and anxiety. These words indeed struck a chord with Qi Chen. He sighed, pulled me into his embrace, and nodded in agreement to take me along. Before I could even feel happy, I was dressed in ordinary soldier's armor by Qi Chen and joined the marching army with him. Once we left the capital, the officers and commanders at the front rode horses. While the soldiers at the back advanced on foot, Qi Chen held no official position. After General Qi's death, he could only enlist as an ordinary soldier. Fortunately, many of General Qi's former subordinates were willing to follow him, waiting only for a victory to pave his way to rapid advancement. But that didn't change the fact that he and I had to walk to the frontier city of Muqing. Once we left the capital, Qi Chen offered to carry me on his back. I thought about the long journey ahead and declined his suggestion. Later, when I was too exhausted to walk any further, he firmly scooped me up onto his back. Later on, he somehow managed to get a horse and took me riding with him. We swayed and jolted along the way, finally arriving at Mu City one evening. Ordinary soldiers had to rise early for training, and I followed along for over 10 days until the barbarians launched an attack. Qi Chen led the old troops of General Qi to achieve the first merit, was promoted, and got his own tent, while I was naturally brought to his side as a deputy general. From then on, I no longer had to attend morning drills. I could sleep in every day until I woke up naturally, and there would always be a hot meal waiting for me when I did. After eating my fill, I would wander around the city, occasionally substituting for Teacher Liu at the school or helping Aunt Shu with her grocery accounts. My days were quite fulfilling. As battle after battle unfolded, Qi Chen's rank rose higher and higher. Eventually, I no longer had to disguise myself in men's clothing and could show my true face to others. I had thought that by following him to the battlefield, I would experience some thrilling moments like sharing life and death with Qi Chen, taking a sword or a blade for him, and earning his gratitude as a savior, but none of that happened. The army held the barbarians at bay so tightly that even in Muqing, the city closest to the battlefield, the lives of the common people remained peaceful and stable. Over time, I actually managed to become a teacher at the school. That Teacher Liu was too old, having taught students all his life, and could no longer get out of bed. In Muqing, there were very few people who understood learning, and Teacher Liu was the only teacher. My father, for all his faults, had hired various tutors for me since I was young. I was practically proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, more than qualified to take on the role of a teacher. That evening after dinner, Qi Chen held me in his arms as we gazed at the stars in the courtyard. The sky at the border was truly beautiful. Tomorrow there's a martial arts competition at the military camp. Would you like to come watch? Shushu. I leaned drowsily against his chest, replying in a daze, no, I have to teach the children tomorrow. Qi Chen nodded, picked me up in his arms, and escorted me back to my room. I rolled over wrapped in the blanket. Watching Qi Chen close the door and leave, just as I was about to close my eyes, words began to float before me. You silly girl, you can teach the child another day. You have to go watch Qi Chen's martial arts competition. Tomorrow's martial arts demonstration is the first meeting between the male and female leads. As the last two standing, they have a fierce fight, sparks fly, and they instantly hit it off. Wah wah wah. So childhood sweethearts can't compete with a destined encounter. No matter how deep the affection, it can't compare to fate. I'm so heartbroken. Men really are all big pig's feet. I snapped awake instantly. Is it a martial arts demonstration? I'm definitely going. The next day, the sky was clear and cloudless. I arrived at the military camp, and Qi Chen's adjutant eagerly led me toward the training ground. Before I could even get close, I heard the deafening cheers and shouts. As I walked over, the people I encountered all made way for me. Master Shen is here. Perfect timing, young General Qi is sparring right now. Hurry to the front and watch. It's absolutely thrilling. Master Shen, come quickly. There's a spot here. I went over and stood still, looking up at the stage. The two figures on it were locked in an intense and evenly matched fight. One of them was Qi Chen, and the other was also a young soldier, with delicate and refined features, dressed in a fitted outfit. His vigorous kicks and punches radiated a vibrant vitality. If not for the strange characters reminding me, I wouldn't have been able to tell at this moment that she was also a woman. Qi Chen and she were locked in an intense battle, each countering the other's moves the moment they were suppressed. This sparring match was nothing short of spectacular. I didn't miss the bright gleam in Qi Chen's eyes as he looked at his opponent, a spark I had never seen before. My chest felt tight, and I left without seeing the end. After coming out, I walked aimlessly, not knowing where to go. I sat down by the river, staring blankly at the distant water. My mind was a mess. and I didn't know why it was so chaotic, it just was. Suddenly, with a splash, someone jumped into the river. My seat was blocked by a tree, so the person didn't notice me. I froze for a moment, feeling a bit at a loss, when I saw the person unbutton their clothes, revealing fair shoulders and a gently rising chest. I immediately realized who this person was. While relieved, I hesitated over whether I should speak up. Just as I was about to quietly leave, someone came from behind, a few soldiers, laughing and joking with their arms around each other's shoulders, were walking toward the river. The person in the water panicked. If these soldiers came over, she wouldn't have time to leave, would be seen completely exposed, and the secret she had been hiding all along would be revealed to the public. I watched as her face gradually lost its color, then stood up and walked out. Master Shen, you're here. General Qi was just looking for you. I stood blocking the intersection, smiling as I said, I was feeling a bit stifled, so I came here to get some fresh air. Seeing that I had no intention of moving, the group exchanged glances, gave each other a look, and said, then we won't disturb Teacher Shen any further. The group turned and left. The person in the river had also finished dressing and walked ashore. She awkwardly touched her head and introduced herself first. Just now, thank you, Miss Shen. I'm Xia Sheng from the cavalry camp. I nodded. Xia Sheng had hastily put on clothes that were almost completely soaked, and this was definitely not a good time for conversation. We exchanged a few pleasantries before parting ways. On the way back, my mood had lightened considerably. What I think is, even if Qi Chen really falls for someone else, it wouldn't be a big deal for me. In the beginning, I refused to break off the engagement because of those strange words, but it was only out of fear that one day in the future, I might be disfigured, thrown into a beggar's den, and starved to death. Given my current relationship with Qi Chen, even if I really break off the engagement with him, I can still walk away unscathed. On the way, I ran into Qi Chen, who had come looking for me. Seeing me, he breathed a sigh of relief, walked over, and took my hand. Song, he said, you came to the training ground. Didn't you say you weren't coming last night? I shook his hand. Of course. I wanted to witness General Qi's heroic demeanor during the competition. Qi Chen raised an eyebrow, a smile in his eyes, looking quite pleased. Then you didn't come for nothing. Your general won first place and got you a fine piece of fur. I nodded. Thank you, General. Just saying thank you isn't enough. On the way back, Qi Chen mentioned that he would be free tomorrow evening and asked me to accompany him to the Lantern Festival in the city. Before I could respond, he declared it as a thank you gift and said I couldn't refuse. I didn't tell him either that the school would be closed tomorrow, so I would not only be free in the evening but also during the day. Well, a thank you gift is a thank you gift. A few days after that encounter with Xia Sheng, she came to see me with some gifts, saying she wanted to properly thank me. Before leaving, Xia Sheng somewhat awkwardly asked me to keep her secret. I nodded in agreement. I had experienced life in the military camp when I first arrived. It was tough, exhausting, and far from easy. Xia Sheng not only survived there but also earned numerous military merits. Honestly, I deeply admire her. Perhaps because of this shared secret, Xia Sheng and I began to interact more frequently. She would send me some rare trinkets from who knows where, and I would often bring her nourishing soups to help build up her health. Xia Sheng's martial skills were among the best in the camp. But she was far too thin. To say that I saw her jump into the river for a cold bath that day, such behavior can harm the body over time. After a few interactions, she and I actually became good friends, which I hadn't expected. That day, after delivering soup to Xia Sheng, I ran into Qi Chen at the courtyard gate on my way back. He didn't speak at first, pursing his lips as he looked at me. I was a bit puzzled and took the initiative to ask, "Why are you standing at the door instead of going in?" Qi Chen suddenly reached out and pulled me into an embrace, burying his head in my shoulder, his voice muffled as he spoke. In half a month, the army will launch an attack on the barbarian stronghold. Once I win the battle and claim the top merit, we can return to the capital. By then, we can get married. I nodded, neither confirming nor denying. Your safety comes first in everything. Qi Chen seemed to have something else to say, but all the way into the courtyard, he gently let go of me, turned, and went straight into the kitchen without saying a word. I blinked, glanced toward the kitchen, and then went to dig up the fruit wine buried under the tree. This wine was something I learned from Aunt Chen next door. Aunt Chen's brewed wine is unmatched in Muchen. And since I learned from her, I think the wine I brewed shouldn't taste too bad. There were 2 jars in total, one for Chi Chen and me to drink, and the other to send to Xie Sheng. Perfect. News of the great battle spread, and the people of Muchen began gathering vegetables from their fields and pigs from their farms to send to the military camp. Some had sons in the camp, others had husbands, leaving only the elderly, weak, women, and children at home. Before every major battle, the camp would become lively. Along the way, I witnessed many scenes of loved ones bidding farewell, but when I reached Xie Sheng, it was quiet. She was polishing her long spear. Looking no different from usual, I stood outside and called out to her. She looked up, saw it was me, and showed a puzzled expression. "Shushu, what brings you here?" I lifted the clothes I was holding in the crook of my arm. "The journey ahead will take half a month, and the weather is getting colder. You'll need to wear thicker clothes." Xie Sheng was taken aback for a moment, then took the cotton coat from my hands with both hands. "This," I walked in on my own. Then pulled out a small cloth pouch and took out a silk ribbon from inside. "The cloth strip you use for binding is stiff and stuffy. I went to find Aunt Chen to exchange for this. From now on, use this, it'll be more comfortable." Xie Sheng stood there somewhat at a loss. After I put the things away, I didn't linger any longer. As I left, I said to her, "On the battlefield, swords and arrows are blind. Military achievements are important, but above all, you must take care of yourself. I'll wait for you to come back so we can share a drink together." Xie Sheng nodded heavily, her eyes red. It wasn't until many years later that Xie Sheng briefly revealed her background to me. She came from an ordinary farming family. Her mother gave birth to 3 daughters before finally having a son. To support the son, she and her 2 older sisters were sold to different places. Xie Sheng was sold into a brothel. That year, she had just come of age. She fled desperately, cut her hair short, smeared her face with dirt, and plunged into the military camp. Life in the military camp seemed harsh and exhausting to me, but Xie Sheng said the camp was good. It was the only place where she could survive. She had no way back. Fortunately, she endured it, fighting tooth and nail to carve out a path for herself. The day to return to the capital came in spring. The war had ended in winter, but because it was too cold for marching, they spent the winter in marching. Chi Chen was somewhat injured, so I made him lie in bed to recuperate, keeping an eye on him every day to ensure he took his medicine. It is worth mentioning that Chi Chen and Xie Sheng shared life and death on the battlefield. Xie Sheng took an arrow for Chi Chen, a hidden arrow aimed straight at Chi Chen's heart. If Xie Sheng hadn't blocked it, Chi Chen might not have survived. As Chi Chen spoke, he held me tightly. I could feel his fear, and I reached out to hold him close as well. "Shushu," at that moment, I felt like I almost lost the chance to see you again. I asked Xie Sheng why he took the arrow for me after capturing the barbarian Khan. He said he was afraid that if I died, you would be heartbroken and sad. He took that arrow for me because of you. Regardless of the reason, I, Chi Chen, owe him my life. I must live well, so as not to let him down. What on earth is all this about? And what's with that look of guarding against thieves? I pushed his head away. "I'm going to bring medicine to Xie Sheng. You should lie down and rest properly to recover from your injuries." As the weather grew warmer, the plan to return to the capital was put on the agenda. Chi Chen had won a great victory this time, capturing the Khan of the barbarians alive and expanding the territory of Daong, an achievement even his father had never accomplished. When the army entered the capital, the crown prince led the officials to welcome them at the city gate, with the common people lining the streets to cheer. After Chi Chen entered the palace, I returned to the Chi residence. I had barely sat down when the steward hurried in to report that my father had arrived. When I saw my father, his face was glowing with joy, and he couldn't stop smiling. As soon as I stepped through the door, he rushed over, took my hand, and said excitedly, "You truly are my daughter. You predicted that Chi Chen wouldn't fall, and now you're the great hero of our family." I yanked my hand back forcefully. "Dad, you need to hurry up and prepare my dowry. I'm in a rush to get married, and the dowry can't be too little. If it's too little, people will say our family is trying to climb the social ladder." Nonsense. Climb what ladder? My daughter never abandoned Chi Chen even when he was disabled. Where else could you find such a good woman? It's Chi Chen's good fortune to be able to marry you. I held back my emotions, barely managing to keep a smile on my face. Anyway, now that Chi Chen has been promoted, our family can't appear too shabby and become a laughingstock. Dad, you figure it out yourself. Watching my father's retreating figure, I thought about many things. For example, according to the words I can see, I would be resented by Chi Chen for breaking off the engagement, leading to my disfigurement and being thrown into a beggar's den to starve to death. If things really happened that way, what were my family members doing at that time? Even if Chi Chen holds a grudge, he wouldn't have nothing better to do than to forbid my father from bringing me a steamed bun or a dumpling in the beggar's den, would he? How could I possibly starve to death? Another example, I followed Chi Chen to the border, and for over a year, there was no news from me. Now that I've finally returned, my father's first words were all about that, without even asking if I was doing well, if I was injured, or if I had suffered, not a single word. Although I had long known my father was calculating, it was only at this moment that I truly felt his cold indifference. It wasn't until Chi Chen returned from the palace that I became happy again. Chi Chen was also overjoyed. He reached out, lifted me up, and spun me around in the courtyard. With a smile, he said, "Shushu, I've inherited my father's title, and I've also brought up our matter to His Majesty. In a few days, the imperial decree for our marriage will arrive. I can finally marry you. We're going to get married." I was dizzy from being spun around and leaned into Chi Chen's embrace. At this moment of joy, I knew how hard one it was for Chi Chen. Fortunately, perseverance has finally paid off. Chi Chen said that the imperial decree for the marriage would be issued in a few days. But more than 10 days passed without any movement from the palace. Chi Chen had already started taking his brothers to purchase the items needed for the wedding, leaving the house in high spirits every day. I stayed in the room embroidering my wedding dress, with my already married half-sister making time to help me. During our casual chat, I asked her how she was doing in her husband's family. She smiled proudly and said, "Don't worry, sister, I'm doing very well." I felt reassured. Originally, my father had favored the eldest son of Minister Song, but my sister had taken a liking to the family's second son. I had already run away by then, and with only my sister to rely on, father had no choice but to follow her lead. Looking back now, it seems she made the right choice. My sister has been exceptionally clever since she was a child. In her own words, she could outsmart those people to death. Embroidering a wedding dress is a time-consuming and labor-intensive task. I spent nearly half a month on it. While Chi Chen almost completely transformed the mansion, the most noticeable change was the red silk draped both inside and outside the rooms, filling every corner with a festive atmosphere. But strangely, the imperial decree for the marriage never arrived. That day, Xie Sheng invited me to go to a temple outside the city to offer incense. The bodhisattva enshrined in this temple was widely known for being particularly efficacious. When Xie Sheng returned to the capital, she was rewarded for her merits and given an official position. Now serving as a minor general, she currently serves under Chi Chen, and regardless of anything else, the two of them are a well-coordinated team when it comes to official duties. Chi Chen once mentioned to me after dinner one day that while in Mu City, he had considered transferring Xie Sheng to serve as his deputy general. I wasn't aware of this, but I did know that Xie Sheng had always been in the cavalry camp in Mu City and never served as Chi Chen's deputy. I thought this and asked accordingly. Chi Chen then said, "When I sparred with him back then, I admired his skills and thought that having such a fierce general under my command would surely shorten our return to the capital. But later, seeing that kid always trying to win your favor, I was too busy guarding against him to even think of bringing him under my nose and having him be an eyesore." At that moment, I was stunned. So, the reason Chi Chen looked at Xie Sheng with such a bright expression during the martial arts competition was because of this. When I offered incense to the bodhisattva, I wanted to ask for many things, but in the end, I only made one wish, for Xie Sheng, Chi Chen, and me, the three of us, to be safe and well. I just hope the bodhisattva doesn't think I'm greedy for asking for the safety of 3 people at once and refuse to grant my wish. On our way down the mountain, we encountered a dangerous situation. A group of mountain bandits was chasing a carriage, pushing it right to the edge of a cliff. Xie Sheng immediately drew his sword and charged toward the bandits. I then led the remaining maids and guards to pull the carriage that was about to fall. The carriage curtain was blown open by the wind, revealing a young lady inside dressed in luxurious attire. She looked terrified, her hands tightly gripping the window frame, her face pale, and her swollen eyes filled with despair at the thought of death. Feeling a pang of sympathy, I comforted her. "Don't be afraid, I'll pull you up," she nodded emphatically at me, tears streaming down her face without pause. Fortunately, I had brought many people with me, and slowly, the carriage that was about to fall was pulled back up. At that moment, words swiftly floated before my eyes. If the supporting female character knew she was saving Princess Jiaohua, the very person competing with her for her husband, she would surely regret it, right? Why has the imperial marriage decree been delayed for so long? It's all because the emperor values Qi Chen and wants to marry the princess to him. Whoa. It was finally time for Shen Shu and Qi Chen to return to the capital and get married. But who would have thought a princess would suddenly appear? My favorite couple is about to break up. I'm so heartbroken. RRRR. I was stunned for a moment but didn't let go of my grip on the carriage. I didn't know before, but now I do. But so what? This is a living, breathing human life. In Morcheng, life is above all else. After Xia Sheng had dealt with the bandits, I also managed to pull the carriage completely back onto the ground. Xia Sheng and I helped the young lady out of the carriage, and she thanked us through intermittent sobs. Not long after, a team of guards on horseback galloped up the mountain path, and the leading officer knelt before the young lady. "Your humble servant is late to the rescue. Please forgive me, Princess." Princess Jiaohua was soon surrounded and escorted away. On the way into the city, Xia Sheng held my hand and spoke to me at length. One sentence in particular stunned me. She said she wanted to marry me. I covered my mouth, looking at her and then at myself, the implication clear without words. Sheng, we're both women. How can you start talking nonsense?" Xia Sheng blushed and waved her hands. "It's not what you think. I mean, if you ever need help, I can be there for you." The one just now was Princess Jiaohua. At the last palace banquet, His Majesty intended to betroth the princess to Qi Chen. Although he refused, it's clear His Majesty hasn't given up. We can't question the affairs of the royal family. But one thing is certain, if Qi Chen ever lets you down, I'll take you away. I now hold an official position and have my own residence. It may not be as comfortable as the Qi estate, but I'll do everything I can to give you a good life. I looked at her, my emotions tangled and complex, feeling as though something was swelling in my chest, filling it to the brim. Before I could speak, words began to fly rapidly before my eyes. Though they were just words, I could sense their intense excitement. Arth, it's not impossible either. Those two, I've been wanting to say this for a long time, they are super sweet together. The content that followed gradually became somewhat explicit, and some words were replaced with symbols, making it quite difficult to understand. I selectively ignored these words and first thanked Xia Sheng for her kindness. I think, if it really comes to that, this could also serve as a fallback option. I have always been someone who knows how to plan for myself. But what happened next was somewhat unexpected. The day after returning, Princess Jiaohua arrived at the Qi residence with a grand procession of palace maids and eunuchs. Making a grand entrance, she sent me many luxurious fabrics and jewelry, and at the same time brought the imperial decree for the marriage. After returning, I learned your identity from the palace servants and went to ask my father for this marriage decree. The princess affectionately took my hand, handed the decree to Qi Chen, and looked down at him with her chin raised, saying, "Miss Shen is my life-saving benefactor. If you dare treat her poorly, I will have my father demote you to a harsh, cold place and never allow you to return." I listened with a mix of amusement and helplessness. Who could have imagined things would develop in this way? The princess left happily, saying she would attend my wedding banquet and see me off as a bride. I nodded in agreement. After many twists and turns, my marriage with Qi Chen was finally set for the following March. However, in mid-February of the following year, urgent news arrived from the border. The newly enthroned Khan of the barbarians had allied with the northern Zimin, amassing an army of 100,000 troops, and was now advancing toward Morcheng. The barbarians sent an envoy to the capital, demanding that Daong return the cities they had seized, and also requested a princess for a marriage alliance, threatening to march their army to the border otherwise. The two sides had just fought a major battle not long ago, and both had suffered heavy losses. Logically, they should have been recuperating, but the barbarians had unexpectedly formed an alliance with Shimen. Qi Chen started leaving early and returning late, and a few days later, he brought back news that the majority of the court officials advocated for the marriage alliance and returning the captured cities. Qi Chen was furious. I had seen firsthand how difficult it was to win the previous war. To put it without exaggeration, that victory was built upon the flesh and blood of countless soldiers. But now, not only must it be returned, but a princess must also be sent, and currently, the royal family has only Princess Zhaohua of marriageable age. A few days later, a palace eunuch came to deliver a message, saying that Zhaohua had invited me for an outing. Since rescuing Zhaohua from the bandits that time, I gradually became good friends with her. Because we were both women, Zhaohua often invited me to gatherings. However, this time, the atmosphere was not as relaxed as before. She took me to a hillside on the outskirts, halfway up the mountain. The scenery here was excellent, a hidden gem we had discovered by chance. Sitting on the grass covered with a blanket, Zhaohua raised her glass to me with a smile, then tilted her head back and drank it all in one go. She looked at the capital city not far away at the foot of the mountain and tugged at the corner of her mouth. Scenery like this, I might never see it again in the future. News from the court couldn't be hidden from her. With her face flushed red from the wine, she leaned over and hugged me. As a princess, I accepted my duty long ago. I knew this day would come sooner or later, using me alone in exchange for a century of peace for Daeong, sparing the people from the suffering of war. It's well worth it. She buried her head in my arms and said in a muffled voice, "It's a pity I won't be able to see you off on your wedding day. I promised. But now I have to break my word." I squeezed my eyes shut, afraid the tears would spill out. That evening, back at the estate, I pulled Qi Chen aside and asked him, "If it comes to war, what are our chances of winning?" Qi Chen didn't find it strange that I asked this way. He held me and sat down, replying seriously, 60%. If I were the main commander, with Xie Sheng as the deputy, it could be 80%. Before I could even feel happy, I heard him say, "His Majesty is old and has been frightened by those civil officials. He doesn't agree to send troops." How could this? Does it mean we can only resort to a marriage alliance? Zhaohua's life was saved by me. Attack. Those barbarians have always been ambitious and treacherous. From the very beginning, they intended to annex us. The so-called peace marriage and returning cities were nothing but their delaying tactics. My dear, don't be foolish. If Princess Zhaohua is sent there, she will only be tortured to death by those savages. I stared at these words that only I could see, the sound of my own rapid heartbeat echoing in my ears. I grabbed Qi Chen's arm, revealing for the first time in front of him the side of myself that I had always kept hidden. I said, "Qi Chen, the crown prince has grown up, the emperor is old and frail, and the crown prince has always supported sending troops. This information was revealed to me by my sister, who is now the wife of a minister. Her husband is a supporter of the crown prince." That night, I didn't sleep at all, waiting for Qi Chen to return to the mansion all night. It wasn't until dawn broke that Qi Chen returned, bringing good news with him. Soon after, the emperor fell seriously ill, and the crown prince took over the governance of the country. A few officials who were unwilling to go to war were dragged out by the crown prince and executed in front of everyone. And from then on, no one dared to voice any dissent. Qi Chen was appointed as the great general of the nation and led the army into battle. On the day of the expedition, Zhaohua and I stood together on the city wall, watching them depart. The battle dragged on for a long time. During that period, when provisions ran low, Zhaohua took up her sword and visited the mansions of many powerful nobles, pressing the blade to their necks to demand money. I followed behind her, leading a group of palace servants carrying large chests to collect the gold, silver, and jewels the ministers brought out. After 2 more winters passed, news of victory arrived from the border. On the day of my grand wedding with Qi Chen, the wedding banquet was exceptionally lively. Zhaohua and Xie Sheng accompanied me as I left to be married. Xie Sheng had already resumed her identity as a woman. She is now the only female general in our dynasty. A year after the wedding, I gave birth to a daughter, and both Xie Sheng and Zhaohua wanted to be her godmothers. The two of them argued until their faces were flushed, and as I tried to mediate, I suggested that both could be the child's godmother. Xie Sheng, relying on her agility, had already snatched the child and was holding him in her arms, playing with him. Zhaohua chased after her, scolding loudly. I shook my head and saw Chi Chen giving me a meaningful look. We quietly slipped away from the crowd and went elsewhere to enjoy some peace. That's all for today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. See you in the next video.